Hello and welcome back, artists and designers. We're going to go ahead and hopefully get towards the finish line with this project here, and we're going to add some shading to make everything kind of fit together a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and just hide these layers temporarily because I want to get a brush set up here. So I'm going to add a new layer, nothing on it, fresh blank layer here in just the background, and I want to be able to kind of see what I'm doing with the brush here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the brush tool. Now this is going to work best with a tablet, but you can do it with a mouse. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my brush up top here, or sometimes you can click on it over here, and you want to look inside of this general brushes folder, and we're going to scroll down. You can always make this bigger if you need to. We are going to look for this second to last one here. The soft, round, pressure, opacity, and flow is kind of our default shading airbrush style brush. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and I'm just using my mouse right now. If I click with this, I'll make it a little bit bigger. That's kind of what I'm getting. So it's very dark but very soft around the edges. So if we're using a mouse, I'm going to want to drop the opacity and the flow down on this quite a bit. So I'll bring it down to like 25% or so. So now when I brush with this, you can see it's much lighter. It would take me a couple passes to really build up to a darker value. So if we're using a mouse, you're probably going to want to set the defaults on this to somewhere in the 20 or 30 range. Now if we have a tablet, I can kind of crank this back up to 100, and I can take my tablet, and with the tablet, if I press lightly, I'm going to be able to get that very same look, and if I start pressing harder, I can get that darker look to it. So with the tablet, you don't have to really change the opacity or flow settings. You can pretty much leave them the default of this soft, round, pressure, opacity, and flow brush, but just kind of check that. Okay, so let's go ahead and clear this layer off. So I want to make sure our brush is working. So I'm going to do Control A to select everything on my layer. I'm going to hit backspace or delete to clear it, and Control D to deselect. So let's reveal our layers again. And now we're going to actually add a little bit of shading into this. So I have this layer right here, and let's call this shading or shadows. Okay. And I have this under the Pear house and above the country road because I just want to be working on the country road layer here a little bit. I want to add the shadow kind of under and behind the Pear house. So I'm going to grab my stylus, and I'm going to go ahead and just to kind of start to brush pretty slowly. Now, right now I'm using black. Sometimes what a lot of artists will do is they'll sample a color from a dark area here. So if you hold down the Alt key, the eyedropper pops up, and that's pretty close to black, but it actually is a slightly darker brown color, and it might match a little bit better. And I can start to brush that in. So just a little bit of shading right there. I can make my brush a little bit smaller if I need to, and I can create a little bit of a shadow on that right there. So my shadow is a little bit aggressive here. Oh, and I realized, no wonder it's aggressive. I'm doing it on the country road layer. So let's backtrack for a second here. I'm going to hit Control Z a few times on this. And let's get rid of my shadow here. Let's do it on the right layer this time. Shadow layer. This is going to look a little bit better. There we go. And again, you don't want to overdo it. We're trying to create this shadow in here. Now, sometimes you might want to mess with the mode. So the layer mode, I might want to go down to multiply or darken and just kind of see how that affects it. In this case, I don't know that I necessarily need to do that. I might leave it as multiply and kind of check how that looks. All right, so the shadow there looks okay. I didn't spend too much time on it, but I'm going to go ahead and make the one in the back along the horizon line a little bit darker. So make my brush maybe a bit larger. And I think I'm also going to want to, as I start to brush along this, I'm going to darken that up, but it's also affecting the lightning layer. So I'm going to go ahead and clip this shadows layer. So I'm going to right click and say create clipping mask, and that's going to actually clip it. You can kind of see the difference if I clip and unclip it. So it kind of affects the sky back there as well. So I don't necessarily want it to do that. Now I got a little aggressive here, so let's kind of bring that back with the eraser. I'm going to go in here and just try to be a little bit of a lighter touch with it. So just kind of darken up the edge of the horizon line, get those mountains to kind of go in there a little bit more, maybe hide some of that blue sky, take the brightness of this and just kind of bring it down a little bit so that that goes into the background, fades into the distance. I'm also using this brown, which I don't like as much, so I think I'm going to hold down the Alt key, sample this dark blue back here. Aha, that's better. So we'll do that. And just to bring a little bit of shadow into some of those areas back there. And I can brush over here and get that to kind of sit back in the background a bit more. So to me that looks a little bit better. I'm going to erase the tree here a little bit because I darkened it up a little too much. And let's take a look at that. So if I zoom back out, let's show and hide the shadow layer. So without the shadows, with the shadows. Definitely gets it all to hang together a little bit better. I'm doing a pretty quick job on that. You could definitely experiment with that a little bit more, but the whole idea here is that we're using a brush. It's that soft round pressure, opacity, and flow brush. If you're using the stylus, you can pretty much leave the settings here. You might want to crank them down a little bit depending on how heavy-handed you are. And if you're using a mouse, you're definitely going to want to bring those two down. We're doing this on a new layer, and we're clipping it to the country road. So I think I'll leave it at that for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.